They banned me from my own sister's wedding. Not because I caused a scene, not because I fought with anyone, not because I did anything wrong. They said I would ruin the mood. That's the exact phrase my mother used, ruin the mood. I remember staring at that message on my phone like it was written in a language I didn't understand. Because I had done everything right. For years, I had done everything right, and still, I was the problem. It was a Wednesday morning when the message came. The sunlight was pouring through my apartment windows in Portland, the kind of soft, filtered light that makes everything look calmer than it really is. I was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee half finished, laptop open. My phone lit up with my sister Olivia's name. For a split second, I smiled. I thought she was sending another wedding update, another Pinterest board, another dress-fitting photo. Instead, the message was short, cold, precise. Hey, just a heads up, Julian and I decided to simplify the wedding party. We're keeping things light and positive. You won't be in the bridal party anymore. Hope you understand. Hope you understand. I read it once, then again, then slower. My fingers felt too big for the phone. My coffee had gone lukewarm. 3 weeks ago, I was her maid of honor. 3 weeks ago, I was helping her choose between 2 ivory tones for her Vera Wang gown. 3 weeks ago, I was designing her wedding website because she said no one understood her vision the way I did. And now I was uninvited from the spotlight, just like that. No call, no conversation, no explanation, just a heads up. I didn't cry immediately. That would have been easier. Instead, I felt hollow. Like someone had quietly removed something important from inside me and expected me not to notice. I typed back, "Got it, thanks for letting me know." I watched until the word "scene" appeared. That was it. That was how my role in my sister's wedding ended. I called my mother, straight to voicemail. 15 minutes later, she texted back, "Yes, Olivia told us. We're supporting her decision. It's her big day. Try to understand, Maddie. Try to understand." Those 3 words followed me my entire life. When Olivia stole my boyfriend in college, when she accidentally wore white to my graduation party, when she borrowed money she never paid back, when she charmed my parents into believing every version of events that protected her, I was always told to understand, because I was the older one, the stronger one, the reasonable one. Understanding was my assigned role. That night, Daniel found me curled up on the couch. He didn't ask what was wrong, he already knew. He read the message on my phone and I watched his jaw tighten. "She cut you out like that?" I nodded. "She wants a more positive vibe," I said quietly. "Apparently I don't qualify." He didn't say what he was thinking, but I could see it in his eyes. He had never trusted Julian. From the beginning, Julian Harper, my sister's fiancé. Founder of Obsidian Capital, the kind of man who smiles like he owns the room before he even speaks. He wore ambition like cologne, strong, overpowering, hard to ignore. The first time I met him, he shook my hand and held it just a second too long. Like he was measuring me, like he already knew he would win. My parents adored him instantly. My mother called him driven. My father called him visionary. I called him dangerous, not out loud, but I saw it. The overpolished charm, the evasive answers. The way he redirected simple questions into grand speeches. 6 months ago, my firm reviewed a funding proposal tied to Obsidian. Julian's name was buried deep in the investor list. Something about it felt wrong. The numbers were aggressive. The projections inflated. I flagged it. I refused to sign. I told my parents I had concerns. They told me I was jealous. I told them something felt off. They said I was competing again. That was the moment I realized something important. In my family, truth didn't matter. Optics did. And Olivia looked good with Julian, so my instincts became inconvenience. "Do you want to go to the wedding?" Daniel asked that night. I didn't answer immediately, because the real question wasn't about a wedding. It was about whether I was willing to sit in a room where I had been publicly erased, smile for photos, clap during speeches, toast to a man I didn't trust, while knowing I had been removed to keep things light. Daniel closed his laptop slowly. "Or," he said carefully, "we could leave." "Leave? Yeah, Caribbean, Bahamas, Antigua, somewhere that doesn't know their names, somewhere that doesn't need you to shrink." The idea hit me like oxygen, not running away, reclaiming. "I'm not running," I whispered. He shook his head. "No, you're choosing where you stand." And something inside me shifted. 3 days later, we were on a plane to Antigua. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell extended family. I didn't defend myself in group chats. For once, I didn't explain. Silence felt different this time, not weak. Intentional. 7 hours later, humid air wrapped around us as we stepped off the plane. The villa Daniel booked sat on a cliff overlooking endless blue water. White walls, open windows, no neighbors, no wedding hashtags, no smiling for people who would crop me out later. That first evening, we sat barefoot on the terrace eating fresh pineapple and grilled fish with our hands. No one mentioned Olivia. No one mentioned the wedding, but I felt it. The absence. Like a bruise you press just to confirm it's still there. Later that night, under the outdoor shower, warm water cascading down my back, I let myself finally think the thought I'd been avoiding. Maybe I wasn't the problem, maybe I never was, maybe I had simply been easier to sacrifice. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up before sunrise. I knew what time the ceremony would start. I knew exactly when Olivia would walk down the aisle. I knew the song she chose. I knew the speech I was supposed to give. Instead, I stepped out onto the terrace. The ocean stretched endlessly in front of me, calm, unbothered, unimpressed by human drama. Daniel walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, but in my chest, something heavy sat quietly, because even though I was thousands of miles away, I knew something they didn't, and I had known it for months. Julian's empire wasn't solid, it was smoke, and smoke always clears. Around midnight that night, my phone started buzzing. Not once, not twice, repeatedly. My mother, my cousin Chloe, my Aunt Rachel. Daniel picked up the phone and handed it to me without speaking. The first headline read, "Obsidian Capital under federal investigation." My heart didn't race, it didn't drop, it didn't panic. It simply confirmed. Terms like misrepresentation, frozen accounts, and SEC inquiry flashed across the screen. Julian hadn't commented, but his name was everywhere. Daniel looked at me carefully. "This isn't gossip anymore," he said quietly. "This is federal." I stared at the ocean outside the glass doors. The same ocean that had been calm hours earlier. And I felt something I didn't expect. Not joy, not satisfaction, not revenge, power, because I had tried to warn them. I had seen it, and they erased me instead. Now the world was seeing it too, and I hadn't said a single word. My phone buzzed again, a message from my mother: "Please do not engage with the press, we need to protect the family's image." Not "Are you okay?" Not "You were right." Just protect the image. I let out a slow breath. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I didn't feel the need to be understood, because the truth was already moving. And this time, I wasn't chasing it. I was standing still. That was the moment I realized something. Silent revenge isn't loud, it doesn't scream, it doesn't expose, it waits. And when the collapse comes, it doesn't need to say, "I told you so." It simply watches. And the collapse, it was only beginning. The wedding ended at 11:42 p.m. I know that because that's when the first voicemail came through. Not from Olivia, not from my parents, from Chloe. Her voice was shaking. "Maddie, something happened." I didn't call back immediately. I let the ocean keep breathing. I let the silence stretch. Because for once, I wasn't rushing to clean up a mess that wasn't mine. But when the second voicemail came, and the third, I knew the illusion had cracked. Chloe finally texted, "Julian lost it at the rehearsal dinner." Someone mentioned an audit. Olivia found out more than she should have. An audit? There it was. The word that had been sitting quietly in my inbox 6 months ago. The word I flagged. The word they told me I didn't understand. Daniel was sitting across from me on the terrace, laptop closed, watching my face change in real time. "What is it?" he asked gently. I handed him the phone. He read the message once, then again. "They're unraveling," he said. Not surprised, not smug, just stating a fact. Chloe called again. This time I answered. Her voice was lower now, controlled. "Okay, so here's what happened." Apparently, during the rehearsal dinner, one of Julian's former college friends had too much to drink. He started bragging about how Obsidian almost didn't survive last year, about creative restructuring, about an anonymous bailout. Olivia overheard, and so did 2 board members' wives. Chloe said Olivia dragged Julian into the wine cellar after the last guests left. She asked him if it was true, if the numbers were inflated, if the house they just bought was leveraged, if the prenup protected her or protected him. Julian laughed, then he snapped. He told her she didn't understand complex financial strategy. He told her she was being emotional. He told her to trust him. Then he threw a wine glass against the wall. And that was the first crack in the fairy tale. Olivia didn't stay at the mansion that night. She didn't stay in the bridal suite. She took a rideshare to my parents' house and locked herself in the old guest room. The same room I used to study in. The same room where I cried the night Corey chose her over me in college. Full circle, I didn't say anything while Chloe explained. I just listened, because this wasn't chaos. This was consequence. And consequence moves slowly, but it never misses. The next morning my email pinged. Subject line, SEC inquiry clarification request. I stared at it for a long time, then I opened it. My name had appeared in an unsigned draft investment agreement connected to Obsidian Capital. They wanted to know why I declined to sign. They wanted to know if I had concerns at the time. They wanted context. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel panic. I felt something steadier, validation. Daniel leaned over my shoulder. They're building a timeline, he said quietly. I know. Are you going to respond? I thought about that. For years, I stayed quiet to protect peace. But peace built on lies is just delayed destruction, and I was done being the cushion. I'll respond, I said, not angrily, not dramatically, just clearly. I walked back out onto the terrace. Opened my laptop, logged into my cloud storage. There it was, the file, 6 months old, marked, flagged ethical concerns. I remembered the meeting, the boardroom, the projections. The way Julian spoke in confident spirals that avoided specifics. The way my stomach tightened. I documented everything that felt off. The inconsistencies, the valuation inflation, the aggressive liquidity claims. Then I declined. Quietly, professionally, and my parents called me competitive. I stared at the document on the screen, and for the first time I didn't feel small. I responded to the SEC with a measured statement. I confirmed that I had reviewed preliminary materials. I confirmed that I declined involvement due to concerns regarding transparency and risk. I attached my documented notes. No emotion, no commentary, just facts. When I hit send, I didn't shake. I exhaled. That was it. No social media post, no dramatic announcement, just the truth entering the room. By that afternoon, Julian was trending nationally. Accounts frozen, assets under review. Investors scrambling, Obsidian's website offline. My mother called again. This time I answered. Her voice was brittle. Madison, we need to stay united. The press is circling. This could destroy our name. I closed my eyes. There it was again. The image, always the image. Mom, I said calmly, I tried to warn you. Silence. Then you were harsh. I was honest. She didn't respond, because honesty had never been the family's preferred language. Performance was. Olivia wants to talk to you, she finally said. Of course she did. When everything was glittering, I was unnecessary. Now that it was burning, I was wanted. Not yet, I replied, and I meant it, because this wasn't about comfort. This was about accountability. That night, Daniel and I sat on the beach wrapped in a blanket. The sky was thick with stars. I could hear distant music from another villa, life continuing, unaffected. Do you feel vindicated? He asked softly. I thought about that. No, vindication is loud. It demands applause. What I felt was quieter, like something heavy had finally been set down. I feel steady, I said. That's power, he replied. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Olivia, just one message. You were right. 3 words, no emoji, no elaboration. I stared at them. For years, I imagined this moment. Imagined feeling triumphant. Imagined savoring it. But reading it now, I felt tired, because being right had cost me too much. I typed back slowly. I didn't want to be right. She didn't respond. The next morning, another headline dropped. Whistleblower documents suggest prior internal warnings ignored. My stomach tightened. I clicked. Buried in the article, a reference to a declined review 6 months prior. No name, but I knew the truth was surfacing. And it didn't need my voice, it had its own. Daniel poured coffee and handed me a cup. You okay? I think this is the first time I'm not scrambling to hold something together, I admitted. He smiled softly, because it was never yours to hold. Back in Portland, Olivia stopped answering Julian's calls. My father's business contacts began distancing themselves. Donors started asking questions, and for the first time in my life, no one asked me to smooth it over because they finally understood something. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't difficult. I was aware. 3 days later, my mother texted, "Olivia is staying with us, she's not eating much." That message hit differently, not because of guilt, but because beneath the performance she was still my sister. Broken. Scared, humiliated, I didn't want her destroyed. I wanted her awake. There's a difference. Daniel found me staring at the message. "You going to call her?" he asked. I hesitated, because this was the moment everything could shift again. And this time I would not be erased. "I will," I said, "but on my terms." That was the difference. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting, I was choosing. And when Olivia finally faced me over a video call, the spotlight wasn't on her anymore. It wasn't on Julian, it wasn't on the scandal, it was on the space between us, and what we were willing to rebuild, or finally let collapse. Olivia looked smaller on the screen, not physically, but energetically. Like someone had dimmed her from the inside. When the video connected, neither of us spoke for a few seconds. No background music, no dramatic build-up, just two sisters staring at the wreckage between them. Her eyes were swollen. Mine were steady. "Hey," she said first. Her voice didn't have that polished brightness anymore, just fatigue. "Hi," I replied, simple, neutral, grounded. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to soften myself for her. She swallowed hard. "You were right." There it was again, but this time it wasn't a text, it was heavier. "I didn't want to believe you," she continued. "It was easier to think you were jealous than admit I might have chosen someone who lied to me." I didn't rush to comfort her. Didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. "It wasn't jealousy," I said calmly. "It was instinct." She nodded slowly. "I know that now." Silence filled the space between us, but it wasn't hostile, it was honest. Then she said something I didn't expect. "He told me the numbers were temporary adjustments." My chest tightened slightly. "He said investors panic over minor inconsistencies. He said you were overreacting because you didn't understand high-risk capital strategy." There it was, the script, the one used on women who ask questions. I leaned back in my chair. "I understand numbers just fine." "I know," she whispered, "and I chose not to." That sentence carried more weight than any apology, because that was the real betrayal, not Julian's lies, her willingness to ignore the cracks, and her willingness to sacrifice me to protect the illusion. "Why did you remove me from the wedding?" I asked finally. No anger, just clarity. She hesitated, then exhaled. "Julian said you were bad for optics." The word made me almost laugh. Optics, my own sister reduced me to a visual liability. "He said if the SEC ever investigated, you'd look like a conflict." "And you believed him?" "I wanted the wedding to be perfect," she said quietly. There it was, not cruelty, not hatred, performance. She chose a perfect picture over a present sister. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't list the years of small erasures. Instead, I said something that surprised even me. "I don't want revenge, Olivia." She looked up sharply. "Then what do you want?" "I want to never feel disposable again." That hit her, I saw it. The realization, because disposable is worse than disliked. Disposable means you were useful until you weren't. "I never thought of you that way," she whispered. "I know," I replied. "That's the problem." Behind her, I could hear my mother moving in the kitchen, my father's voice low, tense. The house sounded heavy, different, not celebratory, not curated, real. "I don't know how to fix this," Olivia admitted. "You don't fix it," I said. "You change it." She frowned slightly. "How? You stop choosing men over integrity." I let that sit. "You stop choosing image over truth." Another pause. "And you stop expecting me to absorb the consequences." Her breathing slowed, measured. She wasn't defensive. She was listening, and that was new. After the call ended, Daniel looked at me like I had just stepped out of a storm without getting wet. "You didn't attack her," he said quietly. "I didn't need to. You didn't comfort her either. I'm not her emotional insurance policy anymore." That sentence felt powerful, because for years that's exactly what I had been, the buffer, the fixer, the stabilizer. And stabilizers don't get thanked, they get expected. 2 days later, we flew back to Portland. The cold air hit differently this time, not like a punishment, like a reset. My parents asked if we could have dinner, all four of us. No extended family, no public setting, just us. I agreed, not because I felt obligated, but because I was no longer afraid of the room. The house looked the same. The framed photos, the polished floors, but the energy had shifted. My father greeted me first. His handshake was firmer than usual, almost apologetic. I should have listened to you, he said, direct. No fluff, that was new. My mother stood near the dining table, her posture straighter than usual. Like she was bracing for impact. Dinner was quiet at first, utensils clinking, careful breathing, then my father cleared his throat. I enabled it, he said. We all looked at him. I kept the peace because it was easier. I dismissed your concerns because they complicated things. He paused. And I chose comfort over fairness. Hearing that felt strange, because for so long I thought I imagined the imbalance. Gaslighting is subtle. It makes you question your own clarity, but here it was, acknowledged. My mother spoke next. You were always strong, Madison. We thought you didn't need as much. I set my fork down carefully. Strong doesn't mean unaffected, I replied evenly. It means I learned not to ask. Her eyes watered. I thought I was protecting Olivia. You were, I said, at my expense. That wasn't accusation, it was truth. And truth doesn't need volume. Olivia finally spoke. I was addicted to being admired. No one moved. I liked being the golden one, it made me feel safe. She looked at me directly. And I let you be the responsible one because it meant I never had to grow up. That was the first time she had ever named it. Out loud. The golden child, the steady one, roles we never consciously agreed to but lived inside anyway. I'm not doing that anymore, I said quietly. They all looked at me. I'm not absorbing discomfort to make the room easier. My voice didn't shake. I'm not competing for approval, and I'm not shrinking to preserve image. Silence followed. But it wasn't tension, it was adjustment. The power dynamic had shifted, not because I screamed, but because I stopped bending. After dinner, Olivia stopped me at the door. I don't expect us to go back to normal, she said softly. There was never a normal, I replied. She almost smiled at that. What do you want from me, she asked. Consistency. Not apology, not performance, consistency, she nodded slowly. I can try, that's all I'm asking. That night back in our apartment, Daniel wrapped his arms around me from behind. You handled that differently than before, he said. I know. How does it feel? I thought about that. I don't feel victorious. He smiled. Good. Why good? Because revenge feels loud, growth feels quiet. And I realized something then. This wasn't about proving I was right anymore. It was about proving I was done playing small. Over the next few weeks, more information surfaced about Obsidian. Julian was formally charged with financial misconduct. Investors filed civil suits, board members distanced themselves publicly, and through it all, I said nothing. No interviews, no posts, no commentary. People assumed things, speculated, connected dots, but I never fed it, because silence when chosen is control. One evening, Olivia came over alone, no makeup, no dramatic energy. Just her, she sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I received the message removing me from her wedding, full circle again. I'm in therapy, she said quietly. I know, I replied. Mom told me, I told them not to treat me like I'm fragile anymore. That made me look up. Good. I'm tired of being protected from consequences. That was growth, real growth, not performative remorse. But uncomfortable ownership. She reached into her bag and pulled out something unexpected. My old college photo, the one from graduation, the one she accidentally wore white to. I kept this, she said, I don't know why. Maybe because I knew I hurt you that day. I stared at the photo, at myself smiling, at her standing beside me wearing white, center of attention. I remember that, I said. I do too, she swallowed. I don't want to be that person anymore. For the first time in years, I believed her, not because she said it, but because she wasn't defending herself while saying it. You can't undo it, I told her gently. But you can outgrow it, she nodded. I'm trying. That was enough, not forgiveness, not restoration, but movement. Later that night, Daniel asked me something that stayed with me. If Julian hadn't collapsed, would any of this have happened? I was honest. No, and how does that make you feel? I stared at the ceiling for a moment. Like the truth had to break something before it could fix anything. And that's when I understood the final piece. This wasn't my revenge, it was reality correcting itself. And reality doesn't rush, but it always arrives. The knock on my apartment door came at 7:18 p.m. sharp, unexpected. Daniel looked at me from the kitchen. We weren't expecting anyone. I checked the security monitor, and for a split second my stomach tightened. Julian, he looked different. No tailored confidence, no polished composure. His jaw was tighter, his eyes restless. Cornered men move differently, they lose rhythm. I'll handle it, I told Daniel, not because I needed to prove anything, but because this chapter was mine. I opened the door halfway. What are you doing here? I asked calmly. He gave a tight smile. We need to talk, not please. Not can we, need control language even now. I think you've said enough, I replied evenly. He glanced down the hallway as if expecting cameras. Can we not do this here? There it was, image management, even mid-collapse. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. He immediately lowered his voice. You've been speaking to regulators. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. His jaw flexed. You could have come to me first. I almost laughed. You mean like I did 6 months ago? Silence. He didn't deny it. You don't understand how complex this is, he tried again, that same script. The same condescension. I understand that you inflated valuations, I said calmly. I understand that you leveraged unsecured optimism as guaranteed returns. His eyes flickered. You think you're smarter than everyone? No, I replied. I think I'm honest. That landed harder than yelling ever could. He shifted tactics, softened his voice. I loved your sister. The sentence hung there like it deserved sympathy. Love doesn't erase fraud, I answered. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He snapped suddenly. Projection. Classic. I'm not enjoying anything, I said. I'm done protecting you. That was the truth. And it destabilized him more than accusation ever would. He stepped closer, lowered his voice even further. If I go down, your family's reputation goes with me. There it was, the last card, threat through association. I didn't step back. Reputation built on lies deserves to fall, I said quietly. His eyes darkened. You think you're untouchable? No, I said. I think I'm clean. And clean doesn't panic, he exhaled sharply. Investors are looking for someone to blame. I held his gaze. They already found him. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncertain, not arrogant, not charming, just exposed. Olivia doesn't need to suffer for this, he said finally. And there it was, the only sincere thing he'd said. She won't, I replied. Unless she keeps defending you. His expression shifted again. He realized something. He wasn't talking to the old version of me, the one who softened edges, the one who negotiated peace. He was talking to someone who had already let him go. You could have been part of this, he said quietly. As if offering a final deal, I shook my head slightly. I chose integrity. That was the last word I said before turning back toward my door. He didn't try to stop me. Because manipulation only works when the other person wants approval, and I didn't. Inside, Daniel was watching my face carefully. You okay? I nodded. He's desperate. Daniel crossed his arms. Desperate men make loud mistakes. And he was right. 2 days later, the mistake came. Julian gave an interview not to clear his name, but to control the narrative. He implied internal dissent within potential stakeholders. He suggested that competitors with personal grudges fed regulators misinformation. He didn't say my name, but he didn't have to. The internet filled in the blanks. My inbox exploded, messages, speculation. Reporters asking for comment, former colleagues wanting clarification. I did nothing, no statement, no rebuttal, no defense. Silence. Strategic silence. Because when someone is drowning, you don't jump in to argue. You let the water speak. Then something unexpected happened. An anonymous email surfaced publicly, leaked documents, time-stamped, preliminary projections with tracked edits, Julian's tracked edits, inflated figures. Adjusted risk disclaimers, removed cautionary notes, and attached to the file a comment he'd left months ago. Madison flagged this, remove her from final circulation. It was subtle, professional tone, but devastating proof. He hadn't dismissed me because I was wrong. He dismissed me because I was right. The article spread quickly. This time my name appeared, not as a rival, not as a bitter sister, but as the only person who had documented concerns early. I still didn't speak publicly because I didn't need to. Truth with receipts defends itself. My father called that evening, his voice steadier than before. I saw the documents. I know. I should have trusted your judgment. You will next time, I said calmly. He paused. I'm proud of you. That sentence meant more than trending headlines, not because I needed validation, but because it was earned, not assumed. Olivia came over again that night. She didn't cry, she didn't dramatize. She sat across from me and said something simple. He tried to use you to save himself. Yes, and you didn't react? No, she nodded slowly. I would have. I know, I said gently. She wasn't offended, she was honest. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Do you hate him? I thought about that carefully. Hate is heavy, and I had finally put heavy things down. No, I said, I see him. She exhaled slowly. Is that worse for him? Yes, because once someone is fully seen, the illusion can't survive. A week later, formal charges were announced publicly. Wire fraud, securities manipulation, breach of fiduciary duty. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't dramatic music, it was paperwork. Consequences typed in black and white. Julian was arrested quietly, no spectacle, just process. And I felt nothing explosive, no cheering, no celebration, just closure. But the final twist didn't come from him. It came from my mother. She called and asked to meet alone. We sat at a small cafe downtown, neutral territory. She stirred her coffee longer than necessary. I've been thinking, she said carefully. About the roles we gave you? I stayed quiet. About how we praised Olivia for being visible and praised you for being stable. I nodded slightly. And how that made you responsible for everyone's emotional balance. She looked at me directly. I'm sorry, no justification, no defense, just that, and something inside me softened. Not because I needed her apology, but because she finally saw the pattern. I don't want you to feel like you have to be the strong one all the time, she continued. I don't, I replied calmly. That's new, she smiled faintly. Yes, it is. On the walk back to my car, I realized something profound. My revenge wasn't his downfall. It wasn't public validation. It wasn't headlines. It was this, the restructuring of my family dynamic, the recalibration of power, the quiet recognition that I was never secondary. I was simply underestimated. That night, Daniel asked me one last question. If you could go back, would you warn them again? I thought about the wedding, the white dress, the removal message, the gaslighting, the dismissal, then the collapse, the truth, the accountability. Yes, I said finally. I would. Why? Because integrity isn't about being believed, it's about being consistent. He smiled slowly. That's your power move. And he was right, not loud revenge, not public humiliation, but unwavering consistency. Julian tried one final time to reach me from custody, a short message through his attorney. Tell Olivia I'm sorry. I didn't respond, because closure doesn't require reply, it requires distance. 3 months later, the dust settled. Investors moved on, news cycles shifted, and life normalized, but not the old normal, a new one where I wasn't the silent safety net, where Olivia asked for advice instead of dismissing it, where my parents consulted me without minimizing my perspective, where Daniel and I planned our future without inherited tension, and that was the real comeback, not dramatic, not viral, but permanent. 3 months later, the world had moved on. News cycles replaced Julian with fresher scandals. Obsidian became a cautionary case study in finance forums. Investors reallocated, commentators debated, and my family adjusted. But healing isn't loud, it doesn't trend, it doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself in small behavioral shifts, in tone, in timing, in who speaks first and who listens. And that's where the real ending began. It was a Sunday afternoon when my father called with something different in his voice. Not panic, not damage control, curiosity. There's an opportunity I want your perspective on, he said. Perspective, not approval, not compliance. Perspective, he sent me the documents, early stage tech infrastructure, solid projections, clear disclosures. I read through everything slowly, no rush, no performance, just analysis. When I called him back, I gave him my thoughts. Measured, balanced, where there was risk, I named it. Where there was promise, I acknowledged it. And he listened. Didn't interrupt, didn't override, didn't reframe my caution as negativity. He thanked me. And that moment was bigger than headlines, because I wasn't the afterthought anymore. I was the standard. Olivia changed too, not overnight, not dramatically, but consistently. She started asking questions before committing to things. She started reading contracts. She even asked me once, almost sheepishly, "Can you look this over before I sign?" I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't savor it. I just looked it over, marked the sections that needed clarification, explained why. She listened, not defensively, but attentively, and that's when I realized something important. Growth doesn't erase the past, it redefines the future. Daniel noticed it before I did. You don't tense up when your phone rings anymore, he said one evening. I hadn't realized that. For years, family calls meant crisis management, emotional arbitration, damage control. Now they were just calls, normal, balanced, mutual. That was peace, not forced harmony, but earned equilibrium. One night, Olivia invited me to dinner, just the two of us. No parents, no tension, just sisters. We sat across from each other at a small Italian place downtown. Soft lighting, no spectacle. Halfway through the meal, she looked at me and said something that completed the circle. I don't want to be admired anymore. I raised an eyebrow slightly. She smiled faintly. I want to be competent. That sentence meant more than any apology she could have given, because admiration fades, competence compounds. I can help with that, I said gently. I know, she replied. And for the first time in our lives, it wasn't competition, it was collaboration. But the final power shift didn't come from family, it came from me. From a decision I'd been quietly building toward. 6 months after Julian's arrest, I received an offer, a partnership opportunity, not flashy, not public, but strategic. A firm wanted me to lead risk evaluation for early-stage investments. Autonomy, authority, full control over due diligence processes. They had seen the articles, the documentation, my early flags. They didn't want drama. They wanted discipline, and they wanted me. Years ago, I would have hesitated, wondered if I was stepping into conflict, worried about overshadowing Olivia, concerned about how it would look. This time, I didn't overthink it. I evaluated it objectively, and I said yes. When I told my parents, they didn't flinch, they didn't compare, they didn't redirect attention, they congratulated me. Genuinely, when I told Olivia, she didn't look threatened. She smiled. I guess they finally figured out what I always knew, she said. I tilted my head slightly. And what's that? That you're the one who sees the cracks before the walls fall. That wasn't envy, it was respect. And respect is the foundation we never had before. The real revenge story everyone expects ends with destruction, with someone humiliated, with someone exposed. But that's not what power looks like long-term. Power is stability. Power is clarity. Power is walking into rooms without shrinking. Power is being consulted instead of tolerated. And the most dangerous thing you can become to someone who underestimated you is consistent. A year after the wedding that never was, we all gathered again. Not for a ceremony, not for damage control, just for dinner. There was laughter, real laughter, not curated, not posed. At one point, my father made a joke about running financials by Madison before making any life decisions. Everyone laughed, including me, because it wasn't mockery, it was acknowledgement. Later that night, as I stood alone on the back patio, Olivia joined me. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Julian hadn't been caught? She asked quietly. I stared out into the dark yard. Yes, and I would have eventually walked away. She absorbed that. From him? No, I looked at her directly. From all of it. That truth lingered between us, because sometimes collapse prevents departure. Sometimes exposure saves relationships that silence would have destroyed. I'm glad you didn't, she said softly. So am I, and I meant it, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. When Daniel and I got engaged, quietly, intentionally, I didn't announce it online first. I told my family at dinner. Olivia hugged me first, no white dress, no spotlight, just warmth. And when she stood beside me at my wedding months later, she wore navy. Simple, elegant, supportive, no performance, no competition, just presence, and that was the final proof. The roles had dissolved, not because one of us lost, but because both of us grew. Julian eventually accepted a plea deal, reduced sentence, financial penalties, restricted from corporate leadership. I heard about it through a third party. I didn't react. Because he wasn't part of my narrative anymore. He was a chapter. Closed. Years from now, if someone asks me how I handled betrayal, I won't talk about headlines, or interviews, or viral moments. I'll say this. I stayed consistent when it was uncomfortable. I stayed honest when it was inconvenient. And I stopped shrinking when it was easier to disappear. That was the comeback. Not loud, not flashy, but irreversible. If there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's this. Silent revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about refusing to destroy yourself to protect them. It's about letting truth do the heavy lifting. It's about understanding that you don't need to scream to be powerful. Sometimes you just need to stop bending and stand. That's the part no one claps for, the quiet rebuild, the subtle shift. The moment you realize you're no longer asking for space at the table because you built your own. And when the dust settles, when the noise fades, when the illusion collapses, you don't need applause. You need peace. And peace is the loudest victory of all.